Perfect. Okay. Okay. Hey everyone, happy Halloween and welcome back to another episode of Away She Goes. It is my favorite day of the whole year. Halloween is my favorite holiday. As you've seen, we have been very excited about Halloween all month. This is our third recording in October. Usually you only get two from us in a month, but the way that the days fell, there are three. So today, in honor of Halloween, we are going to wrap up our month and we are going to talk about listener spooky stories and global urban legends. So you may have seen on our Facebook group a few weeks ago, we posted a call to tell us your favorite travel scary stories or a scary story that happened to you while you were traveling. We got a ton of submissions in. We're going to read a few of them. Sophia and I actually are going to tell one each of our own scary stories, things that have happened to us. And then we're going to just talk about a few global urban legends to get us into the Halloween spirit today. So grab your candy, grab your Reese's peanut butter cups, whatever your favorite candy is, and, and sit back because we have a bunch of scary stories today.
Okay, let me start. It was a very stormy day in Norway. I was traveling with my van and my dog Knox. We had just been on one of the worst ferry rides that I've ever been on. Many people sat on board looking over the sea because we all got sick because it was very wild weather. When I got off the ferry, it was quite late. Like it was the time where it doesn't get dark in Norway, but it was still late and I needed to sleep. I first parked next to the sea with a lot of other campers, but it was so windy that the van kept shaking, that I decided that's just not the place for me that night. So I looked for another spot, and sure enough, I found a car park for hiking, and so I went there, and it was pretty decent. It was a little bit off the road, but there were no other cars whatsoever. I mean, it was quite late. It was very bright, but it was late. So then I just closed the van and went to sleep. A few hours later, I wake up to my dog on the bed barking his head off. He's a shepherd, but he's quite the guard dog. And I also noticed the van was shaking, like it was like moving from side to side. And I was not parked where it was windy. It was not from the wind. So I wondered what the fuck is happening. I'm very glad that I have my little shepherd with me. But then I heard the bells. Sheep bells. Yeah, so the resolution of the scary story was that in the forest near the hike trail where we were parked, that there were sheep that were roaming around freely, and when they saw the van, they saw the perfect place to scratch their little butts, which then made the van shake, which then made the dog bark. And it wasn't scary after all, but in the moment, I
it was
woke up
probably terrifying.
with half a heart attack. Yes.
Oh God. Oh, I didn't know. I had not heard this story. I wasn't sure. Like all I can see on our like prep document is Sophia's encounter with sheep, and I'm like, what? Like were they like standing in a circle? I was just all week. I have been wondering what the sheep like. I'm like, were they standing in a circle around the van? Did they summon a demon? Like what? What were they doing? They were just scratching their butts. That's all.
Yeah, they summoned my demon dog.
All right. So my story is not. It's actually not travel related. I'm sorry, but it was by far like the creepiest, weirdest thing that has ever happened to me. So I was in high school. I was in ninth or 10th grade. Maybe I was 15 years old. Um, and I was in my house with my brother, who was 2 years younger than me, and my friend from high school at the time. And we had gone through a phase then where we were obsessed. This is in like 2010. So this is good 13 years ago now. We had gone through a phase where we were obsessed with like the shows like Ghost Hunters, Ghost Advent, all those shows where they would go in and they would get creepy voice recordings and take weird pictures and all that kind of crap. We were obsessed with those kind of shows. So we're like, oh, we're going to do that. So we're in the basement of the house that I lived in at the time that was built in like the 1980s, by the way. So like not old, not haunted, not anything. It wasn't like the house was 200 years old and there was a bunch of shit going on. The house at the time was like 30 years old. It wasn't even anything. Anyway, so the three of us are in the basement of the house, and we had like an old flip cell phone that didn't work, but it could do audio recordings. So we thought, oh, let's like do what they do on TV and like talk to the ghosts, right? So we were asking all sorts of like dumbass questions like, oh, is there somebody here with us? Do you have something you want to say? Like all this shit. And we thought, and mind you, this is like three teenagers acting like idiots, like we thought. So the basement in my parents' house, where obviously I lived when I was in high school, we had like a bunch of boxes down there. It was storage. So what we thought we were hearing like boxes kind of like being pushed and like shuffled around on the floor. They weren't actually moving, but like we kept thinking we could hear that. So the climax of this story is when I wish I still had the recording because I would send it to you and we could play it, but I don't have it anymore. So at one point, my brother asks, like, are you trying to communicate with us? And then there's nothing. And then he says it again. And at that point, what we heard with our ears was a very obvious like box shuffling, and we all scream and like run up the stairs, and you can hear it in the recording. When we listened back to because we were like, oh, haha, let's listen to this. I bet it's funny. When we listened back to the recording, after he asked that second time, are you trying to communicate with us? I literally have goosebumps talking about it. There was a very clear whisper, and it went, no, like a growl. Like, we didn't hear it with our ears at the time. That was not what made us scream and run up the stairs. But like when you listened back to the recording, all you hear my brother go, are you trying to communicate with us? There's a pause. And then no, like clear as day. My mom has heard it and will like vouch for me. My dad has heard it. My brother, like my friend from high school still like remembers it. Like, so yeah, we don't know what was down there, but it like clear as day came through on that recording was like somebody saying the word no, and it freaked us the hell out. And we never did that again.
That is creepy as hell. Mm-hmm. That also reminds me of a TikTok that I recently saw where it was like, in America, like, oh, no one died here. No. It's like all new, no one died here. And then like in Europe, it's like, oh yeah, someone died there, probably there as well. I mean, there was a graveyard down there. There was a plague pit over there.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, don't know what it was to this day, but on that record, I wish, like, I still think about it like every Halloween, like every fall. I'm like, oh man, I wish I still had that because it sounds so ridiculous. But then, like, if I had it and played it, you would hear it. So it's gone into the abyss, but I promise it happened and it scared the hell out of me.
So now let's start with our listener spooky stories. And we'll also start with a haunted house one, because our friend Jenny Dernan used to live in a haunted house. And her story reads, it was a bit too big for us, so we never much went upstairs. But several times the light was turned on, though neither of us did it. And one time I stood in the bathroom where I had lined up all my products around the bathtub. I turned towards the tub, and every single time an item it fell into the tub at the same time.
Oh, time to move. That's it.
Yep.
Get out.
Bye.
Get out. I'm not spending one more night in there. Get the hell out. I know that Jenny has since moved, so she's okay. Don't worry. All right. Our next one is from Steph Orswell. Years ago, I was visiting my grandparents on Cape Cod, and on one of the days we were there, they had an antique car club event. So my stepmom, my sister, and I decided to do something different. I love a good haunting story. Me too. And had heard about the Orleans Inn being haunted, but I didn't want to do too much research before going. When we went over, the reception person asked what we were there for, and I sheepishly said I had heard about ghosts and was curious. The lady looked excited and brought out a book for us to keep that tells tales about the ghosts, which I put in my bag without reading it. So I think what she's trying to emphasize here is that she did not have any like bias going into this. She didn't know any of like other people's experiences. So they told us that we could take our time, and if a door was open, we could go into the room. There was one room that looks like a normal room, but I think they leave the door open when no one is booked in it because they did tell us that this was an active room, so people like to check it out. There was a sort of heaviness to the room, and it was colder than everywhere else, especially for late July, but nothing strange happened. The weird part happened when I went to the cupola and it was set up for a nice dinner for two, I guess. I spent a bit of time looking at the views, and then suddenly I started feeling a tightening feeling around my neck, some lightheadedness, and just a sense of claustrophobia. I am not claustrophobic. When that happened, I decided it was definitely time to head back down the stairs. I only thought I had been up there for a short while, but my stepmom and sister were worried about me because they had been calling my name and I had been up there at least a good 10 minutes. The loss of time and not hearing my name being called really freaked me out, and I still have no explanation. When we got back to my grandparents' house, I got the book out and started reading it. The room we had gone into was home to the ghost of a woman who worked there when it was used as a brothel in the 1920s, who was murdered by a customer. Apparently, she's quite active and friendly. And in the cupola where she was, a bartender had hung himself there in the 1950s. It was almost as if when I was up there, I was reliving what had happened. So that's why I think she emphasizes earlier, I did not read any of this. I did not know this going in. I had this experience and didn't know the relevance of it until after. So that was what happened to her in Cape Cod. She also briefly mentioned she's had other experiences, such as feeling like someone was touching her shoulder while in the Black Mausoleum in Edinburgh. She saw light marks on that shoulder when she got back to her hostel. But she said that reliving the bartender's experience was by far surpasses anything else.
That's insane.
That is.
So the next story is from our friend Stase Yavashvili. And last November, she visited Ireland. And we love a good Irish story. So let's dive into it.
We do.
So we were staying at the community center in a village, and we're told that it was a former cloister and the 7th most haunted house in Ireland. Supposedly there exists such a ranking.
As there should.
32 people had died a violent death at that place, and there were many ghosts. But a lady in white was the most famous one, and many visitors had seen her in the stairs, and she was killed. She was killed in the room 1, just above the stairs, and also has been seen there. Room 1, of course, happened to be the room I was staying in during the 3 nights there.
Of course it was.
Lucky, or well, not so lucky.
Yeah.
The doors were getting stuck, and there was a trick to close them. Otherwise, they would open themselves. I was scared to go to the bathroom, which was down the hall during the night. There were weird sounds of an old building with an old heating system, but I didn't meet any ghosts. Luckily, because later we have some stories about a Scottish haunted house, and did not go so well.
No, it didn't. All right. So the last one that we're going to read is from our friend Rachel. So Rachel says, I was on holiday in the Philippines when this happened. I had been touring around different islands for the beaches. After 3 weeks, I was beat. So I decided to fly back to the capital city, Manila. I went to our ancestral home to visit. Rachel is from the Philippines. I have my own room set up there, although nobody has lived there for a while, just our caretaker who comes every now and then to check up on it and have it cleaned. One night, she said it was just a super random night, her air conditioning broke in her room. This was peak summer, so this was obviously unacceptable. It was super hot and humid, and I couldn't sleep. So I moved to the room next door. This used to be my parents' room. Nobody stays here. Everything here was dated, but it had a bed and most especially an air conditioner. So I turned it on and continued to sleep. Turned off the lights, got ready to go to bed, but I was still so hot. So I sat up and tried to reach the electric fan so I could turn it on. As I was messing with the fan, I felt a cold breeze on my neck. I was obviously already creeped out, but I ignored it. The electric fan just wouldn't turn on, so I kept messing with it. And then I heard whispers in my ear. They were loud whispers. It sounded like a woman's. I couldn't make out what they meant or what it said, but I immediately stood up and turned on all the lights and called my best friend who lived 30 minutes away to keep me company because I was about to throw up from the fear I felt. She came and immediately I told her what happened. As I rambled on, she stared at me for a good 20 seconds. She sighed and said, I wasn't ever going to say anything, but I can see stuff. And I was like, what the fuck do you mean? It's irrelevant. That's an acceptable question. She said, I can see if spirits are lurking about. And Rachel said, well, let's say that's true. This was an empty land when it was bought. It has no history and nobody ever died here. And the friend kind of laughed and said, oh, this is not your family. And then went on to explain that when a place, especially a home, has not been lived in for a while, spirits can move in and reside there. Apparently, spirits like the quiet. An old woman had apparently taken refuge in Rachel's family home and did not like the fact that she was there making noises. She was apparently wearing all black and had a disapproving look on her face. And Rachel said, safe to say the next holiday I book in Manila, I'm getting a hotel room.
That sounds very creepy.
Hopefully you don't have a haunted hotel. Out of the frying pan and into the fire, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So now we're going to transition into just talking about some kind of more well-known global urban legends.
Yeah, let's start with Scotland and the haunting of Castle Stewart, which we picked to remind you that we had a very great first Halloween episode at the beginning of October where our guest's name was Stuart. So go check that out if you haven't heard that yet. But back to Castle Stewart, which is reputed to be one of the most ghost-infested castles in Scotland. Upon inheriting the castle, the Earl of Moray opted to lease it out, but quickly found that individuals were too frightened to stay there. There were murmurs of headless specters meandering through the hallways, dreadful shrieks emanating from an unidentified origin, and the sound of footsteps rushing up and down the stairs during the night. The Earl extended a reward to any courageous individual willing to spend an entire night within the castle, eventually 4 local gentlemen, including a clergyman, a Presbyterian church official, a cobbler, and a robust individual named Rob Angus, bravely came forward. The minister experienced a horrifying nightmare. He was the one that stayed there in the first night, and in the nightmare he saw someone drenched in blood, a figure towering over him, slowly entering the room and settling in an adjacent chair. Upon awaking, he discovered he was still alone, but his mental state was forever altered. The church elder encountered a colossal, blood-soaked man bursting into the room and launching a dagger attack. In the morning, servants discovered him unconscious on the floor. Similar to the shoemaker's encounter was very similar. He heard the door open, witnessed a menacing dark entity with split hoofs approaching him. And then on the 4th night, it was Rob Angus's turn to stay there. He arrived and shared a drink of whiskey with a friendly servant. And when the servant said, "See you in the morning, Rob," he replied, "You will find me as I am or deceased." Rob responded. And unfortunately, that was the last sighting of Rob, ever. If you want to read more about other hauntings in Scotland, there's a book called Scottish Urban Legends where this story was roughly taken from. Also, I looked up the Castle Stewart, and of course, it's now a hotel with a golf course, which is almost as scary.
Yeah, so you want to, if that's what you're looking for, definitely a haunted place. We'll have more scary stories a year from now. If people are like, oh, I went to the Hotel Stewart and this happened. We warned you.
Please send them to us.
We warned you. All right, so I'm going to talk about Alaska. We're going to come back to the United States, North America, the Kushtaka of the Alaskan Triangle. So the Alaskan Triangle may be ringing a bell because it sounds like the Bermuda Triangle, is also known for the high number of missing persons. According to the LA Times, approximately 5 out of every 1,000 people that disappear do so in Alaska. That's a pretty high statistic there. Some people attribute these disappearances to the Tlingit tribe's belief in evil spirits known as the Kushtaka. The Kushtaka are believed to be shapeshifters, like half human and half otter. Otters are cute, though.
Right.
Who lure their victims to the water with deceptive cries and ultimately drown them to steal their spirits. So it almost sounds like a siren.
Oh, yes, very much so.
Like out in the water, luring you out in a storm, kind of makes people go away from the safety of the land out into the water, and then they get you.
Yeah.
So now we learned that there is a Bermuda Triangle in Alaska too.
That is, yeah. There's also a Bermuda Triangle in Bochum in Germany, but that's just the name for an intersection that has a triangular shape. I don't think stuff gets lost there, and people definitely don't die there.
People don't like accidentally fly into it or anything.
No.
I have actually flown over the Bermuda Triangle, I think 3 times. And I have been just because it's the triangle. I think it's like Miami, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda, like are the 3 points of the triangle. And I've been to Puerto Rico twice and I've been to Bermuda once, and you fly, you know, over. So I'm like, you know, I've escaped unscathed so far.
Well, I feel like it's not as much of a problem now with the modern,
Yeah.
with all the modern technology.
I just jinxed it.
Oh no.
No, knock on wood.
So next on we have Japan. And if you're a fan of Japan and Japanese culture, or just a friend of urban legends, knock yourself out. There's a whole Wikipedia page with lots and lots of stories. We had a hard time just picking one because there were so many.
There were like a dozen to choose from.
Probably even more. So the one we chose is about human-faced dog, a word that I could try to pronounce Japanese, but I will just refuse because it's going to be wrong. So these creatures are dogs with human faces that are said to appear at night in Japanese urban areas. They are rumored to be able to run along highways at extremely high speeds, which allows them to overtake cars and then look back at drivers with their human faces. These creatures can also talk, but prefer to be left alone. In some stories, which are often presented as comedic, wherein individuals may encounter a dog rummaging through garbage, only for the dog to look up, revealing itself as this creature, Jinmenken or whatever. No, I did try to pronounce it.
Sounds right.
With its human face, and say something like, "Leave me alone," well, in Japanese. The explanation for Jinmenkins include that they are genetic experiments, or that they are ghosts of a human who was struck by a car while walking a dog. The concept of dogs with human faces dates back to at least as early as 1810, when a human-faced puppy was reportedly exhibited at a misemono. What is a misemono? Do we know that? We don't. Okay. Rumors about Jinmenken may also have circulated among surfers in the 1950s, but the modern concept of the legend is first known to have spread across Japan in 1989. Additionally, Jinmenken or human-faced dogs have made appearances in various media. A dog with a human face appears in 1978's American film Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and Jinmenken have been featured in the anime and video game franchise Yokai Watch. Also, if you're Japanese and would like to teach me how to say that word, feel free to message us.
All right. So the last one that we're going to talk about is my personal favorite. I'm very excited about it. Any of my friends who are listening right now are rolling their eyes because they know what's coming. We are going to talk about the Blair Witch. The Blair Witch Project is it's a scary movie from the 90s, and it really pioneered what they call now the found film era of scary movies. So spoiler alert, the Blair Witch Project is fictional. The urban legend was actually created by the directors of the movie as lore for the movie.
Interesting.
And what they did was, when they made this movie, they really went all out. They created this whole urban legend to validate the movie. And then the movie, what happens is three college students go into the woods in what was formerly known as Blair, which is in Maryland, to just try to film a documentary on the Blair Witch, and they end up having all sorts of things happen to them. And but the movie is filmed from their perspective. The movie is all filmed on like 1990s cameras and like camcorders. And movies since then, like Paranormal Activity, is one that I can think of, where like, oh, the subject of the movie is filming themselves, and oh, we found this footage and now we're showing it to you. The Blair Witch Project started that whole trend. So it is my favorite scary movie. I watch it all the time. I love it. All of my friends are sitting here rolling their eyes at me because how much I love the Blair Witch Project. I don't know why. I can't explain it. Just like it. So the legend, though, like I said, was that the Blair Witch, who was Ellie Kedward, terrorized the town of Blair, which is in Maryland. It's now called Burkittsville, Maryland, during the late 1700s. And she eventually was executed for her crimes. But the following year, her accusers, as well as many of the town's children, disappeared without explanation. And as it was a very small town, and as a result, the town eventually was abandoned. But as the legend goes, other weird happenings continue to plague the area and are attributed to her restless spirit. And then these occurrences prompted the three college students in the movie to go into the woods and investigate. And that ultimately led to the events that you will see unfold in the film if you choose to watch it. Like I said, Blair Witch Project, I think it was released in like the mid 90s, if I remember correctly. But super creepy. And when you're young and you're watching that movie and you think that it's real, because that was the whole premise of the movie, is like people who watched it for the first time in the 90s thought that it was real. They thought that this is legit, you know? So first time I watched it, I think I was 13, 14. I was a teenager, and I was told by my parents, my mother, like, this is a documentary. They found this footage and made it into a movie. So when you think that, it freaks you the hell out. And in part of the movie, this won't spoil anything, so I don't feel bad saying it. The college students at one point walk into a point in the forest, and they basically find all of these like human figures, like made out of sticks, like tied together, like little stick people, like hanging from the trees. So while I was watching the movie with my mom, unbeknownst to me, my dad and my brother had gone outside and made a bunch of stick figures and tied them to the tree outside my bedroom window. So I wake up the next morning, open my curtains, and there's this tree right outside my bedroom window with like stick people hanging from it.
Oh, goodness.
Like, this is why I'm the way I am. Like, this is the problem. So yeah, I love the Blair Witch Project. Every year I watch it multiple times. And it was just really cool how they created this whole urban legend, all to support like their movie franchise. And really for a while, people who watched that movie thought it was real. So go watch it if you haven't. It's kind of one of the classics. They did a not a remake of it. It was kind of a sequel in, well, they did one like immediately after that was not good. And then they made one in like 2016 that was like the brother of one of the original girls who had gone missing was grown up, and he and his friends got like drones and all of this technology, thinking that they could like go into the woods and be fine. And they got all fucked up too. But it's not, I kind of like how you felt about the second Hocus Pocus movie. Like I watched it and I was like, but it couldn't compare to like the original one. So if you're going to watch one, watch the original Blair Witch Project that was released in the mid 90s.
There you
I will
go.
get off my soapbox now.
So that's all the spooky stories we have for you. If you'd like to hear more, we told you about the book, and there's some more Japanese ones. And one of my favorites to follow is Gio Rutherford on Instagram. She's also on TikTok. She does Spooky Lake Month, and so the entire month of October, she posts videos about all kinds of spooky, weird stories that are mostly real. So there's one about the Kamloops shipwreck in Lake Superior. There's something about Lake Vostok, which is a mysterious lake underneath the Antarctic ice. A lake that killed people, like places, like it's all very spooky, but also undeniably real. More so than some of the hauntings that we might have told you about. Because I have to say, I don't really believe in the paranormal, if I have to be
Really?
honest. Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I'm a scientist, and
Yeah. Well, yeah.
the explanations are very thin.
Okay. I do believe in the paranormal. So not all of it necessarily, but like when I watch shows like Ghost Adventures when they're playing their stupid audio, I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, sure. But some of it that I even like me with that record, like it wasn't one of the three of us. I can't explain it, you know. So I do to a point, but not like the dramatic Hollywood version.
Yeah. So that's all for this episode. You have to celebrate Halloween without us now. So
Shame.
go off trick or treat or watch some movies.
Send us messages on Instagram or post in the Girls Who Travel group. We want to see your costumes. We want to know what you did for Halloween.
Yes.
And we'll repost some of our favorites.